Welcome back to the first annual Center for Life conference on teaching faith and entrepreneurship. We are now in the second half and we are rolling. I am so grateful for the presenters so far and really looking forward to our continued guests and leaders. The next of whom is Michael Arena, the Dean of the Crowell School of Business at Biola University, who is going to talk to us about relevant, current, and connected teaching that impacts. So we are very excited to have you. Michael, welcome.
Hi, Corey. How are you? And thank you for the invitation. I have super appreciated the presentation so far. I do have slides, so let me just get there. You should be able to see those now. Yes?
Look great. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Brett. Really looking forward to this conversation. I'll come at this from a slightly different lens. And you're going to see me spend a lot of time talking about artificial intelligence. So if you know anything about Biola, Biola is the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. So exclusively Christian university, liberal arts university. And I am the new dean, new as of last year of the Crowell School of Business, coming from the corporate world. So you may hear a corporate bias in some of the things that I share. But we've been really challenging ourselves to think about like, what does it mean to create kingdom influencers, from the business school, even more broadly across Biola, and maintain relevance, be current and staying connected as opposed to being insular, within a business school. And I'll talk much more about that. And for us, in a moment, but for us, what that really means is our job is to create kingdom influencers. Those individuals, young men and women that can operate with great business excellence, which I'll talk about in much more detail. But also our goal is to build and create spiritual formation in the process. We have decided, and this will be an interesting debate, I'm sure, in some of the Q&A, to fully embrace AI as an enabler to make both of those things happen. And I will talk about how here in a few moments, but the reality is we think that the world is changing around us. We could either stick our head in the sand and refuse to embrace artificial intelligence and its power, because of the existential threats that it inevitably could and will cause, or we could embrace it and leverage it. I love what Andrew Ning says, and that is we shouldn't fear AI, we should embrace it to better understand it so that we can shape its human value. And in many regards, Denise really just talked about this in the previous presentation. It's our God-given responsibility to steward over it, and not be an advocate of it. And that's the position that we've taken. And my goal in these next 20 minutes or less now is to really make an argument as to why this is so important for entrepreneurs and young business people. The reality is 83% of companies have embraced AI as the highest or one of the highest priorities in their strategy today. And we've got this giant void that's happening in academia in particular, because it's only 10% of educators who actually view the same thing. And I don't know if that scares you, but there's a giant gap between how educators are thinking about this and how businesses are thinking about artificial intelligence. And we felt the responsibility to engage and close that gap by thinking about AI through a responsible lens. Just to put a little more context around this before I dive into what we're doing, for entry-level roles, going into businesses or going into institutions, you're seeing more and more, roles and activities being automated and/or augmented, which is changing the nature of people who are entering into organizations. Really creating, much more managerial responsibilities or forcing them to deal with ethical challenges at a much sooner pace than what we have dealt with in the past. And it's going to require a new set of skills, and we're going to talk about that. But it also is true that the pace of work is accelerating. And the velocity of work is increasing quite significantly, and new challenge and scenarios are beginning to emerge. So we feel like it's our responsibility to ensure that we're preparing students for this world, and to challenge them to think about, what is the foundation they rest upon. And I'll come back to that with our biblical principles. And then what are the skills that they need? And just to make this situation even more alarming or concerning, a PwC study recently said that the half-life on new skills inside of institutions today is about 5 years. In some tech worlds, maybe it's even half of that. So the best way to summarize this is to say, more than half of what you teach students, we teach students, will be obsolete by the time that they graduate. And that number is shrinking radically. So it's forced us to think about what are some enduring skills, and how do we start to think about future-proofing students for the world of tomorrow. And I should go back. Let me go back. And this is presuming that we are teaching the right things today. This is presuming that we're teaching current necessary skills. And I think most of us who are in academia would say we're already behind times, and the reality of the world and velocity of the world around us for our students is moving so rapidly that we got to rethink the way that we educate students. So we have sort of drawn a line in the sand, and we've said that we think that our responsibility is to future-proof students in the age of AI. Again, I've already mentioned spiritual formation. I'll come back to that in much more detail. But, it's also for business excellence. And, we have thought about what we call the enduring skills, these skills that are likely going to become more prominent. They're already important, but are going to become more prominent as the technical side and or the functional domain side of jobs begins to be augmented or automated. And that includes things like, certainly innovative leadership and entrepreneurship, and being able to strategically think differently, emotional intelligence. How do you engage in relational interactions? How do you influence? How do you build social capital? How do you engage in, critical and ethical reasoning? What's critical analysis look like? And how do you work in? We think that these are the things that businesses are going to more readily need, and students are going to have to become more adept at managing as we sort of prepare them to step into the business world. So to do that, so one of the things we have done is we've re-outfitted every single class inside of our curriculum to ensure that each of these items is being evaluated against and or incorporated in some manner or another, so that we're ensuring that we've got this integrated thinking on all of these skills. But also, we're changing the platform around how to do this. And the best way to think about this is we're creating more experiential opportunities for our students to engage in learning and understanding things like AI, things like entrepreneurship, and startups, and how to think about crafting and creating their own business. And then ultimately, how do we partner with other businesses and or mission kingdom-minded organizations to help enable them to solve their challenges? And through this portfolio, really on the bedrock of who we are as an institution, our biblical principles, in partnership with Talbot School of Theology, we're trying to create different experiences for our students to master some of those enduring skills, and to do that, once again, on the bedrock of who we are as an institution. So I'll talk about each of these just briefly. We believe that we are the first Christian institution to launch an artificial intelligence interdisciplinary, which is really important, artificial intelligence lab. That is a resource hub, that is a central hub for every school across campus, where students, faculty, and staff can come to engage in and better understand how to responsibly use artificial intelligence. It is run by students. It is obviously chaired by faculty, but it is run by students. We hold workshops. We have flipped the classroom in many regards where students are teaching faculty how to better incorporate AI in their classroom structures. And it's been just phenomenal to watch that experience as students are sharing tools with faculty members who are thinking about how do they redesign their curriculum to be more current and relevant, and engaging in this sort of mixing chamber of laboratory experiences. We've engaged in research. We've looked at deploying AI agents and bots inside of the learning experience, but also supporting some of the administrative work within not just the business school but across campus. And we're really just trying to create internally as many learning opportunities as we can. And I'll share one little anecdote. We have an AI club completely run by students. We had an event the other day where 3 or 4 students showed the latest applications, AI applications from the front of the room. 10 minutes, quick blitz. Here are 6 different tools. And then they turned loose 140 students that showed up voluntarily on their own time, to build in small groups their own business in the next 15 minutes. And I was stunned and amazed at what students who had never coded in their life were able to do with these tools and literally building websites, and a number of other tools in 15 minutes. Now, these weren't fully functioning MVPs, but they were things that were certainly required some coding capacity, and they were developed in 15 minutes, many of which have been picked up and carried forward since. And that's the purpose of the lab. The lab is to engage, educate, and experiment, to think about this on a basis of ethical discernment, with our biblical principles, and to foster dialogue. And we have certainly engaged in that. We have had an Office of Innovation. So we have just simply redeployed it and refocused. This is a very more traditional asset that we've had for a while. We have a large startup competition that's a 14-week startup competition for students. And there are a number of other assets and resources, as we've heard throughout the morning, on that we also have. But the big thing that we have launched recently is what we're calling our AI Venture Studio. So the lab was launched last year. It's an internal resource where students can experiment with faculty and staff, and we certainly bring in outside experts to help internally. But the studio is really our outreach center to help us work with kingdom-minded organizations, both businesses and leaders and nonprofits, to help them think about solving their own challenges. And I'm coming back to this: how do we stay connected to remain relevant so that the skills we're teaching today are the necessary and current skills, and we can accelerate the development of those. So an example of the things that happen in the Venture Studio are, we bring in executive pitches. So we are currently working with Samaritan's Purse on a core challenge that they have with the Operation Christmas Child missions or ministry, and we're helping them. I won't go too much into details, but we've got students in AI squads helping to solve real live practical problems for Samaritan's Purse. And they're doing pitches to us. We're working on the challenges. We're doing iterations and check-ins with them. We're doing exactly the same thing with global media outreach to help them think about how to accelerate the front end of their funnel so that they can accelerate the value of a limited number of missionaries to spread the gospel across the world. And we've got students who come to Biola because this is the kind of work they want to do, but they want to do it with the most sort of advanced set of tools possible. So we're taking on a number of challenges from, in these cases, nonprofit Christian institutions, but we're also working with local entrepreneurs, and local entrepreneurs are coming in and doing classes with students on how do you use RAG models to change the search feature in a auto dealership, or how do we work with local entrepreneurs on creating mental health apps to engage with them. And you can see we're also partnering with In and Out to help them think strategically about how to deploy some of these things in logistics systems. And this is all through this sort of studio that is, really working at three different levels. Executive challenges coming in, entrepreneurs in residence for new startups and many alumni that are coming and using this as a co-working space, partner with students. And then certainly, students have the ability beyond the startup competition to build their own businesses within the studio and to incubate it and work with other students as they're thinking about launching their own business. One of the things I have often threatened across the campus is I don't want to argue or debate about the value proposition of a business education anymore. If we can graduate businesses sooner than students, it's hard to argue that we're not generating value in the education process itself. And that's what the studio is designed to do in conjunction with the internal lab, which is really the bedrock of understanding AI within our biblical principles and using the capabilities of the entrepreneurial mastery from the Office of Innovation. And it's really important. All this is anchored in a different way than what traditional corporations would look at. Most of us think about artificial intelligence here at the technology layer. We think about what's the large language model or what's the supercomputer, and we certainly are. What kind of processing units do you have, and what's the compute power, and what models are you using? This is something we're investing heavily in, which is why interdisciplinary approach is so needed. Many also begin to think about it from an application standpoint. And certainly, the studio and the lab are doing that because these are the practical tools that are evolving every single week that are necessary to accelerate the innovation process. But core to all of this for Biola is the bedrock or foundation of AI ethics. How do you do this in a responsible manner? How do you do this, on a set of core biblical principles that mandate transparency and, protect privacy and protect ownership and data and insist on a new kind of accountability? And that's really sort of core to everything that we're doing. And we will continue, we are partnering with a number of other institutions, faith-based institutions, to think about what does AI look like, on a set of biblical principles. And when should we not use AI? So we are partnering with, as I've already mentioned, a number of institutions to create these biblical principles, which are primarily focused on things like how do we maintain human dignity, as image bearers. What does that look like? And when should we never use AI? When should we not let AI strip away your or my human dignity? And we have these debates, and this is part of the discourse and part of those enduring skills that are so necessary in the world today. And these are the types of things we're embedding in everything that we do. What does stewardship look like? We've already said I've already said we're not trying to be advocates of AI, but stewards over it. And that is, our God-given accountability, as we see in Genesis, to steward over the earth. And I won't go through all these, but there are certain things that we're being adamant about. Like we should not let AI, replace community and relationships. And we're trying to raise the level of this conversation while also equipping our students to deal in the gray space with great discernment and praying for wisdom and protection over deception, which is most assuredly going to happen in this space. So that's what we're up to. I know that was rapid fire and there was a lot there, and I'm at my time, but I just wanted to share, what we at Biola are doing, both from an entrepreneurship standpoint, but also in leveraging AI to make that happen.
Michael, I'm
So,
so grateful. Thank you.
yeah.
Really fascinating stuff. A very quick question, if you'll allow it. What's the entry point for the students? Are they banging down the doors? Are you recruiting?
I think that students are so thirsty for this conversation, and faculty don't know how. Our students are outpacing faculty. So the answer to the question is, we have generated more interest than we could have ever imagined at this point, and frankly, the students are mostly leading this. I hired 5 full-time students to basically resource the lab, and that's all they're thinking about. They're bringing in tools. They're challenging across campus, every single school. They're challenging their faculty, their staff, their deans to think about AI at a different level. So the students aren't the challenge. Faculty and administration, and thinking about sort of closing that gap that you saw in the beginning of this presentation, is the much greater challenge at this stage.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, Michael.